Let me ask you something that might catch you off guard. The last time you sat in your doctor's office and had your blood sugar tested, and if you're managing type 2 diabetes, that's happened more times than you can count, did your doctor ever check your zinc levels? Not your A1C, not your fasting glucose, not your post-meal numbers, zinc, the mineral that your body depends on to physically build, store, and release insulin. Here's what the science has quietly been telling us for years. The insulin-producing cells in your pancreas, your beta cells, concentrate zinc at levels up to 1,000 times higher than the cells surrounding them. Researchers have confirmed this because those cells simply cannot manufacture insulin without it. And yet, in a typical diabetes checkup, zinc is almost never tested. That matters more than most people realize. Studies have consistently found that somewhere between 40 and 60% of people diagnosed with type 2 diabetes are zinc deficient. That's not a small group. That's nearly half of everyone living with this condition. And in certain high-risk populations, that number climbs even higher. So while your doctor is ordering every glucose test available, a simple mineral deficiency that may be quietly undermining your body's ability to produce insulin often goes completely undetected. Now, here's where this gets interesting. There is one specific seed, something you can find at any grocery store for under $6 a pound, that contains more bioavailable zinc per tablespoon than almost any other plant food on the planet. And that same seed carries a compound that peer-reviewed research has directly linked to the process scientists call beta cell differentiation. That's the biological mechanism by which your body actually generates new insulin-producing cells from dormant reserves that have been waiting for the right conditions to activate. By the time we're done here today, I'm going to walk you through that seed, the exact amount you need, how to prepare it properly, and 3 additional seeds that each address a completely separate piece of the blood sugar puzzle. Together, they form a morning protocol built entirely on clinical evidence, one that most people managing type 2 diabetes have never been introduced to. If you're finding this valuable already, go ahead and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this information reach the people who need it most. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. We upload new videos every single day focused on helping you understand your health more deeply. My name is Dr. Carter. My background is in preventive medicine, and for years, I've worked specifically with older adults navigating metabolic conditions, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and the complications that tend to follow when those conditions are only ever managed on the surface rather than addressed at the root. And I want to be upfront with you about something. For a long time, I thought about type 2 diabetes the way most physicians are trained to think about it, as a condition that progresses, gets managed with medication, gets adjusted over time, and eventually produces complications. That was the standard framework, but over the past decade, the research has shifted, quietly, significantly, and in ways that mainstream diabetes education has been slow to absorb. One of the most important shifts in that research is this: the beta cells in your pancreas are not simply on an irreversible countdown to zero. Under the right biochemical conditions, they can be protected. In early and moderate stages of type 2 diabetes, the pathways for cellular recovery are genuinely accessible. And certain compounds, found in everyday seeds, sit right at the center of that evidence. That's exactly what we're covering today. Not shortcuts, not miracle claims. Real biology, real studies, and a real protocol you can start tomorrow morning. Before I go further, drop a comment right now and tell me, has your doctor ever ordered a zinc or magnesium test for you? Just write "never checked," or "yes, they did." I read every comment, and your answers tell me exactly how widespread this gap really is. Let me give you a way to picture what's happening inside your pancreas that I think will make all of this click. Think of your pancreas like a raised garden bed. Your beta cells are the plants growing in that soil. When you're young and metabolically healthy, the soil is rich and full of minerals. The plants grow strong, they produce abundantly, and when an older plant naturally dies off, seeds already in the soil germinate and replace it. The system renews itself. Now picture that same garden after 30 or 40 years of depletion. The plants are still growing, they're resilient, but the soil has been gradually stripped of the minerals that power not just growth, but the entire repair cycle. Zinc, magnesium, manganese, the foundational micronutrients that keep the garden self-sustaining. As those minerals disappear, the existing plants start underperforming. They produce less, they become fragile. And when an older plant finally dies, the seeds waiting in that depleted soil simply cannot germinate because what they need to sprout isn't there anymore. That is type 2 diabetes at the cellular level. Not just isolated beta cell damage, a metabolic environment so depleted in foundational minerals that your body's natural regeneration cycle can no longer complete itself. The progenitor cells, the reserve cells your body intended to become new beta cells, are still present, but the biochemical environment they need to activate has been drained away. Now, hold on to this next part, because it's the most important thing I'll say. What if you could remineralize that soil? not a pharmaceutical, not a surgical procedure, simply restoring what the body always needed in the first place. That's not a metaphor for some future treatment. It's a precise description of what specific seed compounds have been shown to do in peer-reviewed clinical research. And it starts with a seed most people walk past without a second thought. The first seed is pumpkin seeds, also sold as pepitas, and they may be the single most underappreciated food in metabolic health for older adults. Here's what makes them uniquely powerful for blood sugar management. A single 30-gram serving of raw pumpkin seeds, roughly 3 tablespoons, delivers approximately 2.2 milligrams of highly bioavailable zinc. That's more than almost any other plant food available. And why does that matter so deeply? Because insulin isn't just a hormone floating freely through your bloodstream, it's a zinc protein complex. Inside your beta cells, zinc ions fold insulin molecules into the correct shape, load them into storage granules, and protect them until rising blood sugar signals their release. Without sufficient zinc, that entire sequence breaks down before insulin ever gets deployed. Pumpkin seeds are also among the richest whole food sources of magnesium. One serving delivers roughly 37% of your daily requirement. Here's why that number is critical. Your muscle cells need magnesium to activate glucose transporters, essentially doors on the surface of your muscle cells that pull glucose out of your bloodstream and bring it inside, where it can be burned for energy. Insulin is supposed to open those doors, but when magnesium is deficient, and studies show that affects between 25 and 48% of people with type 2 diabetes, potentially more in those with poorly controlled blood sugar, those doors stay partially jammed. Insulin sends the signal, but the door doesn't fully open. That is insulin resistance. And it can be driven by nothing more complex than a magnesium deficit that pumpkin seeds can directly correct. Pumpkin seeds aren't just adding nutrients. They're restoring the precise raw materials your beta cells and muscle cells need to function as they were designed to. Now, let me walk you through the 4 distinct biological pathways this morning protocol targets. I know that sounds technical, but understanding the mechanism is what turns a protocol you stick with into one you abandon after 3 weeks. When you understand why something works, you give it time to work. Pathway 1. Zinc-mediated insulin synthesis and beta cell regeneration. Beta cells concentrate zinc at levels up to 1,000 times greater than surrounding tissue. A concentration so extraordinary that scientists actually use it as a method to physically identify beta cells in pancreatic tissue samples. Every stage of insulin production, from reading the insulin gene to assembling the protein to packaging and releasing it, requires zinc at each step. Research published in the Journal of Nutritional Biochemistry found that supplementing zinc-deficient diabetic patients with dietary zinc sources produced statistically significant improvements in both fasting glucose and insulin secretion capacity within 8 weeks. Beyond that, zinc has been shown to activate transcription factors that support beta cell differentiation, meaning the actual formation of new beta cells from progenitor reserves. That's not managing output, that's supporting the regeneration mechanism at its source. Pathway 2, magnesium and glucose transporter activation. GLUT4 dysfunction, the failure of those cellular glucose doors to open properly in muscle tissue, is one of the primary drivers of type 2 insulin resistance. And correcting magnesium deficiency is one of the most clinically validated non-pharmaceutical ways to improve it. A meta-analysis pooling data from 23 randomized controlled trials involving over 1,300 participants with type 2 diabetes found that magnesium supplementation significantly reduced fasting blood glucose. Critically, the subgroup showing the greatest improvement was adults aged 65 and older who received supplementation over longer durations. For anyone in the early to moderate stages of this disease, that is a genuinely meaningful finding. Pathway 3, sesame lignans and liver glucose regulation. This is where our second seed enters the picture, and this pathway targets something most diabetes protocols skip entirely, your liver. Many people don't realize that a large portion of your fasting blood glucose, the number you check first thing in the morning, doesn't come from what you ate the night before. It comes from your own liver through a process called hepatic glucose production. In type 2 diabetes, this process becomes dysregulated. The liver keeps releasing stored glucose into your bloodstream overnight, even during a 10 to 12 hour fast. That's why many diabetics check their morning numbers and find readings that seem disconnected from how carefully they ate. Sesame seeds contain a group of compounds called lignans, specifically sesamin and sesamolin, that have been shown to suppress an enzyme called glucose 6-phosphatase. That enzyme is the primary mechanism the liver uses to release stored glucose. By moderating that enzyme's activity, sesame lignans reduce the liver's excess overnight glucose output. This lowers fasting blood sugar through a pathway that is entirely separate from every other mechanism in this protocol. It's not redundancy, it's a different door into the same house. Pathway 4, sunflower seeds, vitamin E, and post-meal glucose buffering. Sunflower seeds are one of the richest plant sources of vitamin E, specifically the alpha tocopherol form, which has the strongest documented antioxidant effect on beta cell membranes, the cellular walls most vulnerable to oxidative damage from chronic inflammation. But their second contribution is equally important. Sunflower seeds contain chlorogenic acid, a polyphenol that inhibits an intestinal enzyme called alpha-glucosidase, the enzyme your small intestine uses to break complex carbohydrates into simple sugars for absorption. When that enzyme is partially inhibited, glucose enters your bloodstream more gradually after meals. That flattens the post-meal spike. Less spiking means less reactive demand on your beta cells, less cellular fatigue over time, and less long-term damage accumulating in the background. This is, interestingly, the same mechanism used by a class of pharmaceutical glucose-blocking medications, delivered here through a whole food, without the gastrointestinal side effects those drugs frequently cause. Now, let me give you the research behind each of these claims, because I'm not asking you to take any of this on faith. A controlled clinical trial examined adults with type 2 diabetes who received daily pumpkin seed powder supplementation over 6 months alongside standard care, compared to a control group receiving standard care alone. The pumpkin seed group showed a meaningful reduction in HbA1c, a statistically significant decrease in triglycerides, a key driver of metabolic dysfunction, and improvements across multiple lipid markers that were entirely absent in the control group. A systematic review that analyzed 9 controlled clinical trials involving over 300 participants concluded that pumpkin and its bioactive compounds showed consistent potential for improving glucose outcomes and metabolic biomarkers in people with or at risk of type 2 diabetes. The researchers specifically identified the seed's exceptional mineral density, particularly zinc and magnesium, as central to the mechanism. A comprehensive meta-analysis examining sesame and glycemic control pooled data from 8 randomized controlled trials involving nearly 400 participants with type 2 diabetes. Across that combined data, sesame consumption significantly reduced fasting blood sugar by an average of nearly 29 milligrams per deciliter and reduced HbA1c by approximately 1 full percentage point compared to controls. A separate randomized clinical trial also documented a significant reduction in high-sensitivity C-reactive protein, a validated marker of systemic inflammation, in participants who consumed sesame daily, suggesting the lignans were simultaneously protecting beta cells from the chronic inflammation that accelerates their loss. A landmark long-term analysis following over 85,000 women for 18 years found that higher dietary magnesium intake, primarily from whole food sources including seeds and nuts, was associated with significantly lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes, even after accounting for body weight, physical activity, and family history. A subsequent meta-analysis, pooling data from 25 prospective cohort studies involving more than 637,000 individuals, confirmed that dietary magnesium reduces type 2 diabetes risk by approximately 17% overall, with a clear dose-response relationship. And the protective effect was most pronounced in adults over 55. A published randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial examining 400 milligrams of chlorogenic acid daily for 12 weeks in patients with impaired glucose tolerance found that fasting blood glucose was significantly reduced and insulin secretion efficiency measurably improved. A comprehensive review confirmed that human randomized controlled trials consistently show chlorogenic acid supplementation can significantly reduce post-meal blood glucose and HbA1c levels and improve insulin sensitivity, with alpha-glucosidase inhibition identified as a primary mechanism. These are not dramatic single-meal effects. They are consistent daily improvements that compound into measurable change over weeks and months. That's how metabolic recovery actually works. Now let's get into the complete morning protocol. Specific doses, specific preparation, matched to the clinical evidence. This is not approximate. Seed 1, pumpkin seeds, 30 grams, approximately 3 tablespoons homered every morning. Buy them raw, unsalted, and shelled. The ones labeled pepitas. Do not buy roasted or salted varieties. Roasting reduces zinc bioavailability by roughly 25% and degrades the heat-sensitive fatty acids that contribute to the anti-inflammatory benefit. If the texture is uncomfortable, soak them in water for 15 minutes before eating. This softens them without reducing their nutritional value. Eat them at or before your first meal of the day. One important note, avoid consuming pumpkin seeds at the same time as high-calcium foods like dairy milk. Calcium and zinc compete for the same intestinal absorption pathway, and consuming them together can cut zinc absorption significantly. Space them at least 30 minutes from high-calcium sources. Plant-based milks like oat or almond don't present this issue. Seed 2, sesame seeds. 28 grams, approximately 2 heaping tablespoons every morning. Unlike pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds actually benefit from light toasting. 30 to 40 seconds in a dry pan over medium heat, just until you can smell them, is sufficient. This cracks the outer hull and meaningfully improves the bioavailability of sesamin and sesamolin, the lignin compounds responsible for the hepatic glucose regulation. Don't overtoast. You're cracking the hull, not roasting the seed. Excellent ways to use them include stirred into oatmeal, scattered over eggs, blended into a smoothie, or as tahini. 2 tablespoons of tahini is a practical equivalent, and the grinding process actually improves lignin bioavailability even further. Seed 3, sunflower seeds, 28 grams, approximately 3 tablespoons, every morning, raw and unsalted. Sunflower seeds eaten alongside a small amount of healthy fat, avocado, olive oil, or a handful of walnuts, significantly improves absorption of their fat-soluble vitamin E. The chlorogenic acid works best when it's present in your gut at the start of your highest carbohydrate meal, so timing around breakfast or your biggest morning meal is ideal. Seed 4, hemp seeds, 15 grams, approximately 1.5 tablespoons every morning. Hemp seeds deliver something the other 3 don't. Gamma-linolenic acid, or GLA, a fatty acid precursor to anti-inflammatory compounds that specifically target the chronic low-grade inflammation driving progressive beta cell loss. A large, multi-center clinical trial involving over 100 patients with diabetic complications found that GLA supplementation produced significant improvements across 16 measured clinical parameters compared to placebo. Published research confirms that GLA directly suppresses the master inflammatory signaling pathway, most directly tied to accelerated beta cell destruction. Hemp seeds require 0 preparation. The hull is naturally soft enough for normal digestion. Sprinkle them on yogurt, blend into a smoothie, or mix into oatmeal. Mild, nutty flavor. Genuinely one of the most convenient additions in this entire protocol. Morning additions. 2 cups of green tea or matcha brewed at 175 degrees Fahrenheit. Not boiling. Boiling water destroys up to 60% of the catechin compounds responsible for green tea's metabolic benefits. No dairy milk. Milk proteins bind catechins and block absorption. A squeeze of lemon is fine and actually improves bioavailability. Also add half a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon, not cassia, to your morning coffee, oatmeal, or smoothie. Ceylon cinnamon contains meaningful levels of cinnamaldehyde, which improves insulin receptor sensitivity. Standard cinnamon sold at most grocery stores is cassia, which contains high coumarin levels that at daily doses create unnecessary liver burden. Check the label, it's worth the extra $1. Now let me walk through the 4 mistakes that most commonly prevent people from seeing real results with this kind of protocol. Mistake 1, buying roasted or salted seeds. The seasoned snack aisle seed mixes at your grocery store are not this protocol. Roasting oxidizes fragile fatty acids, reduces mineral bioavailability, and destroys the specific lignin and polyphenol compounds you're trying to consume. For seniors managing blood pressure, the sodium in salted seeds adds an unnecessary burden on top of everything else. Raw for pumpkin, sunflower, and hemp. Light toasted specifically, and only for sesame, for the precise reason already explained. Mistake 2, expecting results in the first 2 weeks. The pathways this protocol targets, mineral repletion, beta cell support, glucose transporter, sensitization, hepatic glucose regulation, are not acute effects. They accumulate. The clinical trials showing the most significant outcomes ran for 10 to 16 weeks. Most people who follow this consistently report their first noticeable shift in fasting glucose around weeks 5 to 7. If you check your numbers every 3 days in week 2, see no dramatic change, and quit, you've walked away from a process that was just getting started. The biology begins working before the numbers visibly move. Give it 90 days. Mistake 3, swapping whole seeds for capsule supplements. This is a common shortcut, especially for older adults who dislike the texture of seeds or find the preparation inconvenient. The appeal of a capsule is understandable, but the clinical evidence consistently shows that isolated seed extracts underperform their whole food equivalents. The reason is mechanistic. The fiber, polyphenols, mineral matrix, and bioactive compounds in whole seeds work together synergistically. They are not independent actors that produce the same outcome when separated. The fiber in pumpkin seeds slows digestion and improves zinc absorption. The fat in sunflower seeds carries vitamin E. These interactions don't survive the extraction process. Whole seeds first, supplements as a last resort, not a convenience preference. Mistake 4, treating this as a workaround for an otherwise unchanged diet. These seeds are genuinely powerful biological tools. What they are not is a compensation mechanism for a diet built on processed foods, refined carbohydrates, and high-sugar beverages. You cannot outseed a diet that is actively working against you at a scale these seeds cannot overcome. This protocol works best as an accelerant for a broader shift toward whole foods, not a loophole that makes that shift unnecessary. One more thing worth addressing specifically for older adults, because it changes how you should think about these doses. After age 65, the digestive system's ability to absorb zinc and magnesium from food declines measurably. Stomach acid production decreases, and the intestinal cells responsible for mineral transport become less efficient. This means older adults typically need more dietary zinc and magnesium to achieve the same serum levels as a younger person eating the same meal. The doses in this protocol are not excessive. They are appropriate for an older adult with age-related absorption challenges. And here is one preparation tip that can make a meaningful difference. Before eating your pumpkin seeds in the morning, soak them in water for at least 20 minutes. Seeds contain a compound called phytic acid, also called phytate, that binds to zinc and magnesium and can reduce their absorption by 30 to 40%. Soaking reduces phytic acid content significantly. You're not changing the food. You're simply making what's already in it more accessible to your body. That one step, done consistently every morning, can noticeably improve how much of this protocol your body is actually absorbing and using. Let me bring everything together before we close. Type 2. Diabetes is not simply about having too much sugar in your bloodstream. At its root, it reflects a pancreas that has been progressively depleted of the minerals and micronutrients it needs to maintain, protect, and regenerate its insulin-producing cells. And in the vast majority of cases, that depletion is never directly addressed, only managed around with medication. Pumpkin seeds, 30 grams daily, raw, deliver the zinc and magnesium that are structural components of insulin synthesis and beta cell function. They remineralize the biological environment your beta cells need to grow and work properly. They are the foundation of this protocol. Sesame seeds, 28 grams daily, lightly toasted, target hepatic glucose production through sesamin lignin activity. This is the mechanism responsible for elevated fasting blood sugar that has nothing to do with what you ate the night before. And it's a pathway almost no dietary protocol directly addresses. Sunflower seeds, 28 grams daily, raw, deliver vitamin E for beta cell membrane protection and chlorogenic acid for post-meal glucose buffering, replicating the mechanism of a class of pharmaceutical glucose blockers through a natural, well-tolerated whole food. Hemp seeds, 15 grams daily, provide GLA-driven anti-inflammatory action that directly suppresses the chronic inflammation responsible for the ongoing, progressive loss of beta cell function over time. Together, these 4 seeds address 4 completely distinct pathways: mineral repletion for insulin synthesis, hepatic glucose regulation, post-meal glucose buffering, and beta cell protection from oxidative damage. No single medication, supplement, or dietary intervention targets all 4 simultaneously. Add green tea at 175 degrees, Ceylon cinnamon, and above all, consistency over 10 to 12 weeks. And you have a morning protocol grounded in peer-reviewed clinical evidence. Your garden is not gone. The soil just needs remineralizing, and you can begin that process tomorrow morning with seeds that cost less than your next cup of coffee. If this video gave you something genuinely useful, and I believe it did, please share it with someone managing type 2 diabetes or prediabetes. Over 400 million people worldwide are living with this condition, and the overwhelming majority have never been told that their body has real, accessible pathways for metabolic recovery. That information deserves to travel as far as possible. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do it right now. It takes 2 seconds, it's completely free, and we upload new videos every single day. The next one could be just as important as this one, and subscribing is the only way to make sure you don't miss it. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next video.